once when I was going to Kalamazoo, one day I saw a guy hitchhiking, and I think he was the worst looking person I've ever seen hitchhiking. He had on an army poncho, and he just looked terrible. But anyway, I gave him a ride, and he was getting off at Three Rivers because he had heard that you could sleep in the police station. It was beginning to be kind of cold, and if you, I guess if you weren't arrested, you could go ask the police station. They would let you sleep in one of the cells for the night. And so he was going to stay in the police station. And but I told him I'll be going back through here about 9 o'clock. And so if you don't find a place to sleep, just meet me at this restaurant, and I'll give you a ride back to Niles and find you a place to sleep. And so he was there when I came back, and he went back to Niles with me, and he told me his story. And it was just amazing. He had worked for an airline in Chicago, and he went to Indiana to see about getting a job once he got laid off. And he was in South Bend, and he put his clothing in the dry cleaners, and he had his case that had his underclothes and everything in it. Went into a barber shop to get his hair cut, and somebody stole his clothes. And then he didn't find a job, and he didn't have the money to get his clothing out of the cleaners. And so I guess he found this, maybe at a salvage store or something, he found this army poncho, and he was wearing that. But he had worn his shoes to where he didn't have any sole left in the shoes. There was just a little strip of leather that between where his toes bend, and that's what kept him from the shoes from falling off. But he was actually walking on the sidewalk or the street. So turned out he was just the nicest person you've ever met that had just had the terrible misfortune. And so I got him a place to stay and got him a job working on one of the farms, and I invited him to come and have dinner with us. And I noticed he wouldn't come. And then later, maybe a week or two later, when we'd gotten his clothes out of the cleaners and everything, and he was ready to go back to Chicago, I asked him why he had never gone back home, because he still had friends and family. He said once he looked so badly, he looked like the worst bum you've ever seen. He couldn't stand the idea of going back and people seeing him that way. And so when finally we got some work and got his clothes out of the cleaners and everything, he was really a fine-looking fellow, well-educated, talented, one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. And not everybody I gave a ride seemed grateful, but I believe he wrote me a letter, and he was one of the nicest letters I've ever gotten. Let me tell you one other hitchhiking story. I gave a young man a ride one day, and I was going to stop for lunch, so I asked him if he wanted to have lunch with me. And he agreed, and so we're in this restaurant, and I told him just to order anything he wanted, and he became a little suspicious. He said, "Why are you helping me?" He said, you know, his mother had kicked him out of the house, he lost his job, and everybody had turned against him because he was such a rascal, you know. And he said, "Why would you be helping me?" And I said, "Well, it's actually pretty simple. I'm a business person, and when I look for a business deal, I look for the best deal with the least amount of risk. If I'm trying to help somebody, I look for the most risk with the least return." And I said, "Son, you're the worst deal that's come down the pike." And he laughed, and he understood what I was saying. But anything spiritual, you need to look for high risk. Anything business, you need to look for low risk and high return. So he understood that.